Good day, my friends. It's Carpo here, and I'm about to sit and ramble a little bit about a vision for the future, what it means to be educated or intelligent, and a few books that I find are interesting. These books specifically are pertaining to understanding people, understanding each other, understanding how we, battery low, understanding how we interact with one another and why we do the things that we do for the sake of bettering the environment for everyone. Now, there are a lot of frustrated people out there, and because of that frustration, people become hostile. That hostility leads us into many dark corners where a person may think that they are completely righteous in protecting whatever it may be, protecting their land, protecting their homeland, their religion's beliefs, or their race, or their culture, and meanwhile being unable to, let's say, move forward as times change. And the opposite end of this is people wanting to move forward too quickly in this idea of what we call progress. And we never stop to ask exactly what we're progressing towards. And it frustrates a lot of people because they're born into this world and they grow up and realize one day that they can't change the world as quickly as they'd like to. That the world doesn't bend over for them because they want to see things a certain way. And that reality will slap you right in the face. It's something that we all come to terms with in our lives. And no matter how much we want to delude ourselves or hide when we're younger by saying, well, I'm not going to do things the way society does it, eventually you have to educate yourself and figure out what's really going on in the world, or else you will get left behind. And I don't mean just, with financially or with a career. I'm talking by people, by life in general. The universe, the world, it helps people who help themselves. This is what the power of intention is. This is what manifest destiny is. It's not some new age pipe dream about writing on a vision board what you want and just forgetting about it, or saying, oh, I want to manifest $1 million. That's let people go ahead and try that, but it's a matter of putting into action. The intention in your mind is only there to plant the seed. Now, if you plant a seed in a garden and you don't water it and you don't nurture it, it won't grow. And it's the same thing with ideas. It's more than just a metaphor. Ideas will flourish and grow when we put them into our minds, and we have to analyze them over time. So often we'll plant a seed and find out that we have to cull that plant because it's not valuable to our futures or anyone's. And as we get older, we have to let go of a lot of crap that we used to want to believe. For example, this book I'm reading, I just got the other day. It's the first one I was going to mention. It's called Nature and Psyche. And it's called Nature and Psyche, Radical Environmentalism and the Politics of Subjectivity by David Kidner. And this is, okay, so I'll just read the little, I won't even read it. It's not worth it. The first part of it is talking about how environmentalism takes the defense or protection of the environment almost too far in some cases, and never stopping to ask, that, in other words, the answer to unharnessed, unbridled progress and pushing forward with the Industrial Revolution brought about environmentalism, which became radical environmentalism, and it's to the point where people are firebombing, logging trucks, things like this, and taking it to extremes, but it's all in the name of the greater good, when many of the people who, are involved in and I'm not against environmentalism here, don't get me wrong, just it's a fascinating angle that sometimes we don't make set forward a real plan of action as to how to actually, what is the alternative to where we're at. We try to talk about natural order and following natural law, but all of this is just subjective. It really has to do with what the individual thinks is the way that nature works and operates. We're still learning this. This is where science has helped us, but also where science has trapped itself in its own dogma, where it's the idea of discovery for discovery's sake, not for creating something that we need or can use. And it's frustrating to people to be in the middle, because you see extremes on both sides. People who are completely abusing the planet, and then those who are completely out to protect it, yet maybe are protecting angles that, you know, for example, trying to stop oil. Or I could take it to the extreme, trying to stop air travel because of the pollution in the skies. You know, are we really going to be able to stop airplanes from flying? Probably not. So what can we do to, you know, try to ease these problems? Well, we can look for cleaner fuels. We can look for alternative fuel sources, which a lot of us do. What this brings forward in the long run is people that say, we have free energy devices and they're all being obscured by, you know, a blanket of you know, that the oil companies and all these major energy companies are keeping it quiet. You can look into history and see that this has happened before, with it killing the electric car and a variety of other things. The question isn't whether or not people are trying to, you know, suppress, you know, cleaner energy sources. It's a matter of whether or not there really is a free energy device that we could all fit in our pocket that some people seem to think we have. To me, this is kind of like a pipe dream at this moment. Let's say solar power, for example. The amount of pollution that creating solar panels puts into the environment is very excessive. When it comes to wind power, the amount that to create the high-powered neodymium magnets in those are mined from China, and there's radioactive waste and sludge pits all over. You can't seem to win, and this is why I'm saying that we're kind of trapped in this paradigm we've created using the fuels that we have, plastics, all of this, and it's brought us to the point where there's a lot of people just laughing at each other. Rather, you know, what's the word I guess I would look for? You know, it's you know, people aren't taking each other's opinions seriously unless they're backed with actual factual evidence. The problem is that today factual evidence is out the door. It doesn't matter. You can show somebody a report written up with, you know, 100 tests done on something, and if it's not what they want to see, it's fake news. Or, you know, do it again, do another test. So many, you know, industries have tested until they find the results they want. So we, the public, are lied to constantly. We're trying to understand our place in society, while at the same time realizing we have to find our place within nature itself. And so that would be a good time to bring out the next book, which is just mythology. Any mythology book. I just grabbed this one off the shelf. I've got a few, but fascinating look into, you know, when I was younger, I used to think, wow, mythology, it's just people trying to explain away the things that they see. Well, in a way, yes, but it's not like these people were stupid. They spent thousands of years on these myths, much longer than any of the silly myths that we've created in today's world. And they endured because they were stories. They were archetypal stories. I think that understanding mythology helps us understand ourselves. And that's because we all share some of the, you know, the features and the attributes of the various characters within mythology. Joseph Campbell took it to the point where he, you know, set up the hero's journey and the 12-part path, returning back to, you know, a call to action where a person goes along this journey and they face adversity, and in the end they learn something new from it. And this is the story of all of our lives, you know. It's something we all share. Even a man in a business suit or a guy in a tie-dye, you know, and that's what we have to realize. When we say we're all one, it doesn't mean we all have to agree with one another. It just means we have to respect one another. Which, this book, little book called In Search of Authority, this one's actually about literary theory, but I thought it was a good title, because I have another one that I'm not sure where it's at. It's about authority, and it's like, basically, what is authority, and who has the right answers for you if you have a question? How do you know if a person knows, you know, the proper way to respond to your question? And when we talk about authority, it's like author, you know, the creator, the person who gets it, let's just say. And there are authorities on subjects, but what I wanted to mention about that was that we defer authority to others, and we've been doing this for so long. We let the kings have divine rule, and now this is changing. You know, we're saying just because you wear a suit and you work for this company doesn't mean that you really know what you're talking about. People are figuring this out, that there are a lot of dumb smart people out there, so to speak, and a lot of smart dumb people out there. And that's another thing to remember. These are just terms, of course. You know, we all have varying degrees of intelligence, and intelligence is not just about book smarts at all. There's musical intelligence, you know, interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences, how you interact with the world. I mean, you could be completely illiterate and still be a wonderful person and very educated and intelligent in other ways. But I think that having understanding of literature, having understanding, being able to read and continually practicing our reading and writing skills is so crucial, because without it, we miss so much. We think with the internet, hey, we don't have to read anymore, and that's complete. You know, that's bullshit. We know it. I mean, if you really want to get into something, you read a book. I mean, it's so much. You know, there's something about grabbing a book and being able to read it in any location and making it through this one book, rather than being pulled from web page to web page to web page, finding out that they're sponsored by, you know, a particular company or organization, and not knowing what's real and what's not. Not that books are all real either, but this next book I have here is Enduring Issues in Philosophy. This is a fascinating book. It's an older book, not too old, but it's like, what is ultimate reality, and God must exist because the world exists, and evil is compatible with a good God. So it makes statements, and then it tries to defend and refute those statements. And it breaks down, like, there are very few issues that we really have that we haven't, that are really super important to us in the philosophical context, that, you know, issues of good and evil and free will and determinism and all this. These are things we've been working at as long as we've been around. So we'll probably be working on them for a long time. This one other book I threw in the pile, which is Hallucinations by Oliver Sacks. And I'm also reading another one from him called Musicophilia. And this book is about various conditions of the mind and of the eye, of the body, which people have various conditions of synesthesia, where your senses are mixed up, or different types of brain damage, which can cause you to hallucinate literally a person sitting in the room with you while everything else is normal. And how many of these different conditions are really not well understood yet, and but that they're just as real to the person who has them. Probably one person out there watching this probably has hallucinations of some sort or another, but doesn't want to talk about it, because I guess a large percentage of the population, you know, has hallucinations of a very real sense, but either don't realize they're hallucinations sometimes, or are really scared to talk about it because it's taboo. You know, the minute you talk about hallucinating, you're labeled as a nutcase by a lot of people in society. So people tend to keep that quiet. Chaos. This was sent to me by one of my subscribers. Thank you. Blaze Harmon sent me this, and I just threw it in the pile because I'm partially reading this one too at the same time, and it talks about fractals and geometry, and it's right along the lines of what I'm trying to understand, the chaos and the order, and what brings the two together. It's, you know, a fascinating subject that's really not understandable by mortal man as far as I'm concerned, but it's a good read. You know, understanding our place with plants and how we relate to nature also means how we relate to substances. And so these last three books that I threw in the pile, I just wanted to share, because if anybody's really interested in not just knowing plants, this won't teach you everything you need to know about plants or drugs. Rather, these books put in a poetic, mythological sense how the spirits or essences of these substances relate to us and our psyche. There's Pharmacodynamics, Stimulating Plants, Potions, and Herbcraft, Excitania, and Empathogenica. This one's called Pharmacognosis, Plant Teachers, and the Poison Path. And this one's called Pharmacopoeia, Power Plants, Poisons, and Herbcraft. Fascinating books, well worth the read. I've perused parts of them, haven't really, it's not the kind of book that you read from front to back. But I have I'm not a huge bookie. You know, I don't have a whole lot of books, but I've got at least 100 good books that I've collected, and that I still need to read a lot of them. But I wanted to bring that up because books aren't all there is. You know, a lot of people who read a lot of books, you know, they can seem a little bit arrogant about it. Like, well, I read. Like, well, you know, it is an important thing, but it's not something that everyone can do. Some people aren't able to focus as well as others, and audiobooks are really good for that. In fact, when I was working, when I was doing carpentry by myself for a year or so, doing finish work, I spent most of the time listening to my headphones every day at work, on the way to work, on the way home from work, at work. I was listening to several different philosophers and speakers, and audiobooks about history and whatnot, and it was a really cool thing. I learned so much during that time. So if you have the opportunity to, you know, listen to audiobooks while you're at work, I mean, that's a really good way to learn. And I guess I'm just sitting here, you know, it's almost cheesy, like sit here, I'm urging people to read. People already know, you know, reading is important and reading is useful, you know, it's like, but it's something I feel like it's really falling by the wayside, not just the reading part, but what we read, you know. And hey, if you like nonfiction, if you like fiction, either way, you know, it's your call. There's nothing wrong with reading stories, fiction stories, and enjoying them. I used to when I was younger. Today I can't read a book that's not somewhat educational in some way, unless it's a story that's written in an archetypal fashion, such as, like, you know, ancient stories or Greek mythology. Those are interesting, but even that stuff's hard to read. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I understand every single thing I read. That book I'm reading, you know, Nature and Psyche, it's a complicated book. I mean, it's not hard to read. It's just, I kind of have to look a little closer. It's not an easy read for me. And it would depend on your level of, you know, book smarts, your level of, you know, how well you are with words, right? How good you are with words. I have people tell me, like, oh man, you're good with wording stuff. I'm like, you have no idea how much trouble I have trying to figure out words to define, even the things that I want to define. I'm not a college grad. I'm not you know, I failed most of my classes in school because I didn't want to do the homework. But I always had a desire to learn. I just learned in my own ways, and I think I learned most of the stuff I learned after I left high school. So, you know, it was once I was in my 20s is when I started learning a lot of the stuff that I know now, and most of the things that I'm interested in, you know, I've only learned in the last 15 years. So it's never too late. And, you know, I think it's crucial that we learn as much as we can about our surroundings, our environment, and the people, because the people are the most important thing. No matter how much we know about, you know, how the environment works, no matter how much we understand about quantum physics or space or the ocean, it's not going to do us much good if we're still fighting wars in 20 years over, you know, resources, if we're destroying our crops and our land, but at the same time ask the question, are we really doing all this? Is it really as bad as people make it out to be? And that's what I want to leave on. A lot of people say, look, we're just destroying the planet. And sometimes, I mean, I step back and say, how much of the planet are we really destroying, and how long will it take for the planet to recover from this? Which aspects of it are so damaging? Well, deforestation, yes. Burning oil, that is horrible. But I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. In the long term, the Earth, it will reclaim its atmosphere. I believe that the Earth has its own, you know, immune system, if you will. I won't go into the details on all that, because that brings in a whole... I'm not saying we should keep burning oil. I'm just saying, if we stop looking at how bad things are and say, how do we fix them? If we stop focusing on how fucked up the world is, and start looking at the forests we still do have, and the parts of the ocean that still are clean, and, you know, maybe that's shallow, maybe that's ignorant, but we have to look at what we have left, at where we really stand and our real part in nature, and try to make it better for the future generations. Because we as humans, that's what we want to do. We just, you know, we care about each other. Hopefully. Talk to y'all later. Have a good one.